Hi, welcome to week 2. Hopefully you got your lab kit ordered and you're getting ready to get started on that. This week you're going to learn about two major molecules of life. One of them is going to be water and the other one is going to be carbon. First let's look at water. Water is H2O and it forms something called a polar covalent bond, meaning that the electrons that are shared between the oxygen and the hydrogen aren't equal. And by doing so, oxygen is kind of stingy, keeps those electrons near its nucleus, and when it does, it creates a partial negative charge. That leaves the hydrogen with a partial positive charge, which means that this water molecule that comes along is going to be attracted to this partial positive because it has a partial negative. That right there explains all of the properties of water. Just this idea that these molecules don't share equally. You have a little bit of a positive and a little bit of a negative, and just like a magnet, they're attracted to each other. And that little attraction makes for a really big effect when you put lots and lots of water molecules together. So some of the properties of water are things like temperature modulation. It helps cool you off. For you, you see it when it takes a long time to boil the water when you're trying to make the pasta. It also works as a really good solvent. Our whole body is a solution of water, and I enjoy coffee and lemonade and tea. Certainly don't want those items dissolved in oil. You'd rather have them dissolved in water. Water is a better solvent. The other thing, water molecules like to stick together. So it's hard to break them apart. And like plants, use this idea of, it's called cohesive behavior, them sticking together in order to get water from the roots to the leaves. Water is also one of the things that they look for when they're looking for life on planets. Everything that you are going to look at in terms of water is going to be able to be explained by the juxtaposition of these molecules. In a liquid, these molecules are really, really close together and you have lots of hydrogen bonds. As a gas, they're going to be further apart. As a solid, ice is much more structured with these hydrogen bonds and makes it float. So that means in the wintertime in the lake, instead of the water freezing from the bottom up, it freezes on the top and then forms an insulative layer. So there's lots of properties of water that help promote life on Earth. If you didn't have a good temperature modulator, we wouldn't have seasons, and it would get crazy cold at night and super hot during the day. The water in the ocean helps to regulate that temperature. Now, carbon forms something called a non-polar bond. It's bonds that it has, the covalent bonds that it has with other molecule or other elements, they share equally. And by having that equal sharing, it's called a non-polar covalent bond. And this carbon is going to be the backbone of a lot of our big major molecules. And the study of carbon-based life forms is something called organic chemistry. So I like to make the joke that when you go into the grocery store and you ask where the organic section is, well, everything in the grocery store is organic except for water, because organic means that it's made of carbon. So when you look at the structure of this carbon, it bonds 4 times and it makes sort of like a tetrahedral shape. And what this does is you can put them in long strings, you can put them in short strings, and what you're going to look at this week is these functional groups. You can take the same carbon and change what it does by structure and function by putting on a functional group. So like this functional group is called an OH group. It's an alcohol. Here's the oxygen, here's the hydrogen. You put some more hydrogens on this, and you get something like ethanol, which is the same thing that you have in your gas and the same thing that you have in your alcoholic beverages. And if you watch the little video online, this little molecule that has a couple of carbons and an OH group can wreak some serious havoc on your brain. You can take this functional group off, and you can put a different functional group on. There's 7, I think 7 in total. You need to know hydroxyl, which is an OH, carbonyl, which is a carbon double bonded to an oxygen, which kind of looks like this. So that goes on like that, and those are found in sugars. The other, if you take this and you add the carbonyl plus a hydroxyl, then you get a carboxylic acid. These are very important when we're going to talk about proteins and amino acids. The other part of that amino acid group is an amine group. That's a nitrogen bonded to a couple of hydrogens. There's a phosphate group that's very important in the structure of DNA, as well as energy molecule called ATP, which we'll talk a lot about. And there is a methyl group, which probably is the simplest form, and that's basically a carbon with 3 hydrogens attached. It's very simple, but it can make a big difference in terms of whether or not you have cancer. If you have a ton of these attached or not attached to a particular gene, it can cause cancer. The other one is the exception to that rule where I said you only had to know carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. There's a sulfhydryl group. That is a sulfur plus a hydrogen, and basically the easiest way to remember that is whenever you see an S, remember stinky. They form a group of molecules called thiols, and they smell terribly. Think of rotten eggs and skunk smell have lots of thiols in them. For this week, you're going to need to know the 4 properties of water, and then you're going to need to look at those functional groups, know their function, know their structure, and one of the few things this semester, while I just ask you to just commit that to memory, you're just going to have to memorize them. You are going to have a lab this week where you start working with your lab kit. As always, I'm going to post a video about that, as well as if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to hit me up on Google Chat or send me an email.